I've said in a number of these videos that quite often good design is very simple. And if a designer or maker gets it right, then those items can be made for hundreds of years. If it works, it'll last. And I'm going to look at some cutlery today, which follows that principle. It's a very simple but very effective design. And we've given this type of cutlery the generic name of rags type cutlery. The reason being is because this set or this form is stamped WH Rag Patentee, suggesting they were the originator of the design. Whether they were or not, we don't know. They might have just stamped patentee as a form of protection without spending the money to actually take the patent out. And as you can see, the handles form the sheath for the knife and the fork. Very simple. So they're protected. They're not going to get damaged or cause you any harm during travel, and you end up with a very simple bar which is easily packed away. Now this set of WH rag cutlery is made of rosewood. You can also find it in ebony. They're not as easy to find in ebony, and rosewood certainly is more common. And the two pieces of each handle are bound together with pewter, as you can see. Then the blade and the tines are made of steel. Now, you probably won't be able to see in this light, but the blade is stamped WH Rag Patentee. Now, unfortunately, there were an awful lot of rags in Sheffield in the 19th century who were cutlers. There was W.H. Rag, who was a cutler born in 1798, and he and his wife had a son also called W.H. Rag, both of them William Henry Rag. And William Henry Jr. was born in 1830, 1831. And he was described in a census of 1851 as a spring knife maker. And that presumably is what we would call today a pocket knife or a penknife maker. Now, he worked for a few different companies, and in 1871 he set up his own company. And I haven't seen the trade card, but apparently somewhere out there's a trade card of his, which on it states that he is a patentee of emigrant cutlery. And we've had one set of rags patent cutlery, which is stamped emigrant. So that ties in nicely with him. And you can see why he might have called it emigrant cutlery. In the late 19th century, a lot of people were moving around the world. They were going from Britain to America or Australia and New Zealand or India, looking for a better life or to make their fortune. So that name would tie in nicely with them. They would be able to associate with them, and hopefully, he thought, I'm sure it would drive sales of the patent cutlery. Now, whether William Henry Jr. was the originator of the design, or his father was, or perhaps even a third person that we don't know, we're not sure. I get the feeling that this is earlier than 1871, just by the feel of it, the very rectangular square section handles with pewter banding, the shape of the fork and the knife. To me, it feels more like early to mid 19th century. Perhaps some more information will come out on it and we'll be able to date it much harder, and I'll be proved wrong. But for me, it feels early to mid 19th century. Now, we've had other forms of his cutlery, not made by Rag, but made by other people. Sometimes they're stamped with a name. We've had names such as Hill, who was a cutler and dressing case maker at Fort Haymarket in London. We've had Dodworth and Temple. We've had F. Ashman and Co. of Sheffield. And the set that we had by them was more like this, and it had a couple of metal bandings on the handle to also fit a spoon in on the side to give you a set of 3 pieces of cutlery. Now, this set I would date typically as either side of 1900, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if this type was used in the First World War. The handles are cheaper cut of mahogany, and you've got brass banding to the end. And if we look at the knife and the fork compared to that by Rag, you can see it's much bigger, perhaps a little bit chunkier, perhaps not as refined, to me all suggesting a later date. And this set is stamped Sheffield, England. Now, if they're stamped made in England, then that points to a later date of just before 1900, either side of 1900, where items for export for the American market had to be stamped made in England. Now, this set is very similar, but I would date it a little bit earlier. And the reason being is the wood used. Now, this form we normally only ever see in mahogany. This set has got handles made of lignum vitae. You can see the sapwood here, and it's a much denser, heavier wood. Sometimes it's called ironwood. And it makes it just that little bit more special. And this set is also stamped Sheffield, England. And it could be 1870, 1880, round about there somewhere. Now, this set stands out as very different to the others, much smaller in size. We can see that the edging is pewter, and it's got a sort of a wriggle work design on it, which is also on the tines, the scales of the handles. Now, we've had maybe 3 or 4 of this form before, and we've had them with ivory scales. This set is actually bone. If you look closely, you can see some dark flecks from the bone in there. We've also had them with horn scales, and we've also had them made of silver. And of course, if they're made of silver, that points to them being made for use for eating fruit. The purity of the metal, of the silver, much better for eating fruit, because it's not going to take away from the taste like steel might do. And now we can see the size compared to the Rags set. Now, the knife on this pair is stamped Rogers, and Rogers were great cutlers in Sheffield. Their business was established in the 18th century and carried on into the 20th century. Very well-known knife makers in the city of steel that is Sheffield. And I would suggest that this set is early to mid 19th century. A little bit more refined, delicate, and very nice. We can see there's a little bit of damage there to the pewter, and you can see how that's happened. Someone's missed a couple of times sliding the fork in, caught the pewter, which of course is quite a soft metal, and pinged a little bit off there. Not a lot we can do about that. That's just something we've got to live with, I'm afraid, but you can see how it happened. So there you go, rags type cutlery. We've also had these sets in little leather cases. We've had one which had its own individual leather case. We've also had a pair in a leather case. And sometimes you'll see on the rags cutlery that they're stamped with a number, both knife and fork having the same number. And the reason for that was that if you had more than one pair, you'd be able to distinguish which fork belonged to which knife from the numbers on them. So to bring us all the way back to the beginning, as I said, good design lasts. And I saw recently an advert for some Japanese cooking knives, and they were made to exactly the same design. So instead of a knife and fork, there was a pair of knives, much bigger in size than this set, but working on exactly the same principle. So that's nearly 200 years after the original design was probably first conceived. So good design, simple design, it lasts the test of time.